Just temporary. Those were the words my only son spat at me after 15 years of sacrifices, sleepless nights, and working double shifts just to keep him fed, clothed, and safe. 15 years I raised him alone, while his father disappeared without so much as a phone call. 15 years of birthdays without a gift, parent-teacher nights with only me in the room, hospital stays with no one to hold my hand but my own trembling fingers. And yet, the moment his father reappeared, with his shiny new wife and her painted smile, my son turned to me and called her Mom. When he slid those adoption papers across the table, my heart cracked. He didn't even look ashamed. She's better at it than you. You were just temporary. My name is Lena Whitmore. I'm 38 years old. And if you think you know how this story ends, stay tuned. Because what none of them realized was that by signing those papers, they had just destroyed everything they thought they were gaining. What happens when the family you built rips itself away from you? What happens when betrayal becomes the sharpest knife, one you never thought your own child would wield? I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even let the tears fall in front of them. I just smiled. A quiet, broken, dangerous smile. Because while they were celebrating their new, perfect family, I was already making my first call. And when the truth finally surfaced, they would understand. I was never the temporary one. I was the foundation. And without me, they were about to collapse. The ink on the adoption papers wasn't even dry when they invited the neighbors over for a celebration dinner. I wasn't included, of course. My son, their new son, sat at the head of the table like a prize they had just purchased. I drove past their house that night. The lights glowed through the curtains. Laughter spilled into the street. My son's voice rang out, calling her Mom. Each syllable landed like a knife in my chest. But I didn't cry. Instead, I parked 2 streets down and opened my laptop. You see, what they didn't realize was that those adoption papers didn't just shift parental rights. They shifted liability. His father and that woman had no idea they'd just taken on every financial and legal responsibility for the boy they claimed as theirs. The medical bills I'd been paying for years? Gone. His father would inherit them. The college savings account in my name? No longer theirs to touch. The trust fund my parents had set aside for their grandson? It was tied legally to guardianship, meaning it had just defaulted back to me. And the part that made me almost laugh in the dark? The adoption erased my obligation to them. Completely. That night, while they toasted their fresh start, I filed a notice with the court. One that would trigger the transfer of every pending debt, fee, and financial tethers straight into their laps. By the time the cake was cut, my son's father and his perfect wife had inherited a storm they didn't even see coming. And as for my son, well, he was about to learn the difference between a mother who bleeds for you and a woman who only smiles for pictures. The first crack in their perfect life was coming, and it would be loud. 3 days later, my phone rang. I didn't answer. I just let his new wife's voice fill my voicemail, cracking, desperate, not at all like the polished woman who had smirked at me across the lawyer's desk. Lena, there must be some mistake. We just got a notice from the hospital. Over $84,000 in outstanding bills, all in our name now. I almost laughed. Mistake? No. That was the cost of raising a child when the father disappeared. A cost I carried on my back for 15 years without complaint. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, listening to her beg. She wanted me to explain, to fix it, to help. The same woman who once looked me in the eye and said, "You should be grateful we're taking him off your hands." Grateful. That word still burned. By noon, more messages poured in. Calls from my ex-husband, from his lawyer, even from my son. His voice trembled as he asked, "Mom, what's happening? Why are they saying it's our debt now?" For the first time in weeks, he called me Mom. But it wasn't love, it was panic. I didn't answer him either. Instead, I forwarded every new bill, every insurance rejection, every medical debt I'd been holding on to, all neatly packaged to their attorney. Legally binding, airtight. My signature no longer required. The house of cards they built was already shaking. And as I sat back, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't revenge by fire. This was revenge by silence. Because sometimes the most powerful sound in the world is the absence of your voice. And they were about to drown in it. The first time I saw them crack was at the grocery store. She was at the register, swiping her pristine credit card, when it was declined, twice. The cashier offered a quiet, embarrassed smile. She snapped, red-faced, fumbling for another card that barely scraped through. I stood 2 aisles away, unseen, watching the woman who once called me temporary crumble under the weight of the word permanent. By the following week, I got word through mutual acquaintances. Her boutique clothing store had temporarily closed. My ex-husband had started selling off his luxury watches online. They were cornered, scrambling, bleeding money they thought would last forever. And my son? He texted me, "Mom, Dad, and Sarah are fighting every night. They say it's your fault." I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For years, I would have rushed in, defended myself, explained, tried to win his heart back. But not this time. Instead, I typed 3 words. Actions have consequences. And I hit send. That night, I sat in bed and scrolled through my old photos of him, his first steps, his gap-toothed smile, the messy birthday cakes I made with my own tired hands. I whispered into the dark, "You'll understand one day, my son. Maybe too late, but you will." Because what his father never taught him was loyalty. What his new mother never gave him was sacrifice. And what they all failed to realize was that my silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Every debt notice they opened, every angry call from creditors, every broken luxury was another reminder that while they laughed at me, while they erased me, I was building the quietest, sharpest weapon of all. Not anger, not hate, proof. And the proof was burying them, one bill at a time. It didn't take long before their desperation reached my doorstep. One rainy evening, as thunder rattled the sky, I heard the knock. My son's voice trembled through the door. "Mom, please. We need help." I froze. For 15 years, I had been his safety net, his shield, his mother. Now, he stood outside with the woman who had called me temporary, her designer coat soaked, mascara streaking like war paint. And beside her, my ex-husband, silent, jaw tight, eyes darting anywhere but mine. I opened the door just enough to meet their faces in the light. Sarah spoke first. We need a loan. Just something small. We'll pay you back. You're his mother. You can't just let him suffer like this." Her voice cracked on mother. My son's eyes pleaded. For a split second, my heart ached, because love doesn't vanish, even when it's betrayed. But then I remembered the papers he signed. The words, "You were just temporary." So I smiled. Calm. Controlled. "You signed away your loyalty, remember? You chose temporary." His face went pale, lips parting as if the words finally echoed back at him. Sarah hissed, "You can't do this. We'll lose everything." I leaned closer, whispering so only my son could hear. "Everything you lose now is everything I gave up to raise you alone. Maybe now, you'll learn what those years were worth." Then I closed the door. I stood there, my hand pressed against the wood, listening to the muffled sobs, the angry shuffle of footsteps fading into the rain. My chest heaved, not with triumph, but with the kind of sorrow only a mother knows, the pain of watching your child choose poison and beg for antidote. But I couldn't open the door again, because true lessons aren't taught with hugs. They're carved by consequences. The fallout was swift. Within weeks, Sarah's reputation as the perfect stepmother collapsed. The adoption deal she had flaunted at brunches, her proof of victory, was now her undoing. Agencies she worked with cut ties. No one wanted to be associated with fraud tied to financial misconduct. My ex's new family business crumbled under the weight of unpaid debts. And my son? He became invisible in their chaos. The boy who once sneered at me now stood in courtrooms, his voice shaking as lawyers recited his choices back to him. I wasn't there to gloat, but I heard every word from my attorney. He willingly transferred guardianship to the stepmother, they repeated. He willingly voided his rights to his biological mother's estate. Willingly. That word echoed through the chambers like a gavel on stone. At night, My phone lit up with his messages. Mom, I didn't know what I was signing. Mom, she tricked me. Please, I just want to come home. Home. The same home where I once patched his scraped knees, where I worked double shifts to keep food on the table, where birthdays were celebrated with homemade cakes because money was tight, but love was full. And now he remembered it. But memories don't erase betrayal. I typed back, fingers steady. You told me I was temporary. And I believed you. I didn't press send. Instead, I saved the draft. My hands trembled not from rage anymore, but from grief. Because revenge doesn't silence the ache of motherhood. It only sharpens it. Still, I knew this. He had to sit in the wreckage of his choices. Only then could he understand the weight of what he threw away. And until that day, my silence was the loudest lesson I could give. The silence cut deeper than any words. Weeks passed, and each one carved another line across my heart. He kept calling, sometimes angry, sometimes begging, sometimes whispering apologies I had once dreamed of hearing. But every ring was a reminder. He had chosen her. He had chosen papers over flesh, signatures over blood, and a stranger's promise over the woman who never abandoned him. Meanwhile, Sarah's empire of control collapsed in plain sight. The mortgage on their new house defaulted. The business she bragged about closed its doors. Neighbors whispered about police visits, frozen accounts, and lawyers circling like vultures. I stayed quiet. I stayed away. Until one morning my lawyer handed me a folder. Inside, final documentation. My son was no longer entitled to my estate, my investments, or even the small life insurance policy I once thought would secure his future. Legally, he was a stranger now. And that broke me because I hadn't needed revenge to cut ties. He had already done it himself. That evening, he showed up outside my house. Thin, hollow-eyed, desperate. He pounded on the door, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Mom, please." She left us. She drained everything. I need you. I need my mom. I stood on the other side of the door, my hand on the knob. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't open it. Because motherhood had been my gift, my sacrifice, my life's work. And he had thrown it in my face. Instead, I whispered through the wood. I raised you for 15 years. I loved you more than myself. You told me I was temporary. Maybe now you understand what permanent feels like. I walked away. The pounding stopped. Silence returned. But this silence wasn't mine anymore. It was his. The final page of this story wasn't written in anger. It was written in peace. Months passed, and I built a new rhythm, one without him. Therapy helped me release the guilt I had carried, the self-blame that whispered I wasn't enough. Friends surrounded me with warmth, reminding me that family isn't always bound by blood, but by respect. News of Sarah drifted back in fragments. Eviction, lawsuits, even whispers of fraud. My son was seen at shelters, odd jobs, trying to piece together a life that had unraveled because of the very choice he thought would save him. It hurt to know he had fallen so far, but it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I had carried him, alone, for 15 years. And he had signed it all away with one cruel sentence. You were just temporary. So I became permanent in my own way. Permanent in my strength, my independence, my refusal to bow to those who broke me. I poured my energy into a scholarship for single mothers, making sure no woman would ever feel as abandoned and invisible as I had. One evening, walking home under the glow of streetlights, I passed him on the corner. He looked at me like a ghost, his lips parting as if to call me mom again. But I just kept walking. My heels clicked against the pavement, steady, strong, unshaken. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't temporary. I was forever. And he was the one who chose to erase me. My justice wasn't revenge. It was peace. And it was mine to keep.
I used to wonder if they'd notice if I left the room. Not in a dramatic way. Not with yelling or doors slamming. Just gone. Quiet. The chair pushed back under the table, lights turned off behind me. Would they say my name? Would they ask where I went? Or would they just shift like I was never sitting there to begin with? That house had 4 people in it, but only 3 were ever really part of anything. There was my father, Richard the provider, the voice that settled every debate even when it shouldn't have. My mother, Janice, all control, and no softness, always trying to fix the family's image, but never the damage. And then there was Chase, my younger brother by 3 years, golden loud, always forgiven. He made mistakes and got second chances before the first ones even ended. And me, Claire, 26, still at home, working 2 jobs, doing the grocery runs, folding the laundry no one noticed had been done. They didn't hate me. I wasn't the black sheep. I was just background. Like wallpaper in a room you walk past every day but never remember choosing. Every now and then, I'd try to insert myself. A joke at the dinner table, a question about their day. But I always got the same look from my mom, like she'd heard something buzzing near her ear and wasn't sure if it was worth swatting at. So I went back to the dishes, or my room, or my shift at the pharmacy. Some people say you can't miss what you never had, but I think that's only true when you haven't spent your whole life watching it just out of reach. And in that house, love was a room I was allowed to clean but never sit in. Chase didn't mean to become their favorite. He just was. He was the kind of boy who made a mess and got praised for being creative. The kind who forgot homework and was told he had a different learning style. He once knocked over a lamp, blamed the cat, and my dad laughed so hard he nearly cried. When I asked if anyone would help clean up the glass, my mom said, "Claire, you know Chase didn't mean it. Just pick your battles." That sentence stayed with me for years. Pick your battles. Like wanting someone to take responsibility was too much to ask. I used to think maybe if I were louder they'd notice me more. But I was never built for noise. I was steady. Got B+s. Refilled the prescriptions, made my own birthday cake one year when they forgot the date. The closest I ever got to being seen was when Chase got in trouble and I didn't. Then it was, "Why can't you be more like Claire?" But it was never meant as a compliment. It was a threat, a measuring stick. And Chase never had to measure up, because I was the one expected to bend. Last winter, Chase wrecked the Corolla. It was the car we shared, but I was the one who paid the insurance. He had been drinking. He lied about it. My dad covered it. He told me he's still figuring things out. You were always the responsible one. Like, that excused it. I remember standing in the garage that night staring at the dented hood, my breath turning white in the air. And all I could think was, why does being good only matter when it's useful to them, Janice? My mother used to say I was reliable. That word sounded like praise when I was younger. Now it felt like a tool description. Durable. Predictable, replaceable. Once I asked her if she ever worried about me, about how tired I looked, how much I worked. She barely looked up from her laptop. "Claire, you're not like Chase. You always land on your feet." But what she didn't see was people who always land on their feet. They learn to fall quietly. They don't cry. They don't yell. They just fold. And one day, they stop standing back up. It was a Sunday night when it happened. One of those evenings where the house was dim and quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The kind of quiet that hums with avoidance. I had just finished an 8-hour shift at the pharmacy. My feet ached. My shoulders felt like they belonged to someone twice my age. All I wanted was a cup of tea and 20 minutes without conversation. When I walked into the living room, Chase was there, of course. Sprawled across the couch, socks on the coffee table, the TV flashing colors across his face as he played another game that required 0 consequence. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked past him, but then I saw it my backpack. Dumped out across the rug like someone had shaken it loose. My notebook's open pages missing. Torn out. Crumpled. I bent down slowly, my fingers tracing the ripped edge of a page I'd spent 3 nights perfecting. Med-term prep dosage charts, handwritten case notes from work. Chase. I said not loud, but sharp enough. He didn't even look up. Needed paper, he muttered, thumbs tapping the controller. Took some. Where is it? He shrugged. Trash, probably. I stood up, heart heavy in my chest. That was my study guide. I had patient notes in there. I stopped because I knew he wasn't listening. Finally, he looked over his shoulder, lips curled in that lazy half-smile he always wore when he knew no one would hold him accountable. Relax. It's just paper. That sentence, those 3 words, landed harder than they should have. Maybe because I realized he meant it. Maybe because it was how he saw me, how they all saw me. Just paper, something to be used, discarded, replaced. I picked up the torn pages in silence and walked toward the kitchen. I didn't say anything. Not because I had no words, but because I already knew none of them would land. Right then, my parents walked in from the garage. They were laughing. Richard had probably told one of his stories from college, the kind he only shared with Chase. Janice's hand was still holding onto his arm. They looked like a real couple, a real family, until they saw me. "What's with the face?" Richard asked, his smile already fading. I held up the notebook, fingers shaking. "Ask Chase." He tore up my notes. Just threw them out. Janice glanced toward the living room, barely blinked. "It's just paper, Claire." Chase echoed her from the couch. "Yeah, just paper." And that was when I felt it, that slow, tightening pressure behind the ribs. Not rage, not grief, just something pulling loose. A quiet thread beginning to snap. I didn't say another word. I just turned around, walked past Janice and Richard, and headed for the stairs. If they weren't going to deal with it, neither was I. But then my father's voice followed me. "You know this attitude, it's exactly why no one wants to be around you." I stopped. I turned back slowly, one foot still on the first step, like some part of me hadn't committed yet, like maybe I'd misheard. "What did you say?" Janice let out a sigh. The kind mothers use when they're tired of repeating themselves, though I couldn't remember the last time she'd said anything I actually needed to hear. "Claire, you always make a mountain out of nothing. You blow things up, overreact. Just let it go for once." My jaw clenched. "Let it go. You let him destroy something that mattered to me, and you're telling me I'm the problem." Chase chuckled from the couch. "God, you're so dramatic." I looked at all three of them, the way Richard folded his arms, the way Janice's eyes flicked to the floor like even she didn't want to be in the room anymore. The way Chase leaned back, arms behind his head like a king in his living room throne. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't thrown anything. But they looked at me like I was dangerous. "You act like I'm difficult," I said, my voice steady now, too steady. "But you don't even see what's happening. You let him walk all over me, and when I speak up, I'm the problem." Richard's tone flattened. "Because he's not the one always complaining. That one hit hard, but not as hard as what came next." Chase tilted his head, gave that little smirk again. Then, like he was offering a casual observation about the weather, he said, "We don't need you here." Silence. That's all there was. No gasp from Janice, no correction from Richard, not even a chuckle to say, "Come on, that's too far." They just stood there, didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't disagree. Richard looked down at his watch. Janice shifted her weight like her feet hurt. Chase picked up the controller again. And that was it. That was the moment. Not a knife, not a shout. Just that cold, casual sentence, and the way no one thought it needed correcting. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't demand they take it back. I just breathed. Something in me, something I had spent 26 years holding together, let go. I walked up the stairs without a sound, packed a duffel bag with the things that were mine. Not much. A few clothes, the charger, my license, a ring from my grandmother they always said would go to Chase, but she had slipped it into my hand before she passed. No one followed me. No one knocked on the door. I walked back down the stairs, past the living room, past the people who raised me but never saw me. And as I reached the front door, I heard the TV turn back up. That was the last sound I heard in that house. I didn't have a plan. I drove for an hour without music, without a map, just the low hum of the highway and the sound of my own breath tight in my chest. Somewhere around 9:30, I pulled into a neighborhood I hadn't seen since college. Melissa, a friend I hadn't texted in months, opened the door in pajama pants and blinked twice. Then she just stepped aside and said, "You want tea or a blanket? No questions. No lecture. No guilt." I chose the blanket. That night, I slept on her couch like it was the safest place in the world. Not because it was soft or quiet, but because no one in that space expected anything from me. Not to be calm, not to explain, not to apologize. When I woke up the next morning, the sun had barely broken through the blinds. My phone was buzzing on the coffee table. 12 missed calls. 4 from Richard. 3 from Janice. 5 from Chase. I stared at the screen like it belonged to someone else. Last night they couldn't look me in the eye. Now they couldn't stop trying to reach me. I didn't answer. I just sat there watching the notifications keep coming. A voicemail, a text, another call. Melissa handed me a mug of tea and raised one eyebrow. Family stuff, I nodded. She didn't press. She just sat beside me and waited like people do when they've been through it too. By noon, the calls slowed. The texts started instead. First one, from Janice. You're being immature. Come home. Then, Richard. Enough of this nonsense. This isn't how adults behave. I almost laughed. I had walked out without yelling, without slamming a door, and they still called it a tantrum. They didn't miss me. They missed the help. Then another text came in. Just 5 words, from Janice Clare. Come home, it's serious. That one hit differently. It didn't sound like guilt tripping. It sounded scared. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then I typed back, what happened? Her reply came almost instantly. It's Chase. He screwed up. Bad. And just like that I knew. They didn't want me back because they'd changed. They wanted me back because they had a problem. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen until Melissa leaned over and said, You okay? I nodded slowly. They want me to come back. Something's wrong with Chase. Melissa didn't ask what he'd done. She just said, You want me to drive? I almost said no. But then I looked at my phone again at the words he screwed up. Bad. And I realized I didn't want to help. I just wanted to see it. See the panic. See what happens when the golden boy runs out of gold. See what they look like when they need the one they pushed out. Yeah, I said. Let's go. It took 15 minutes. The drive felt faster than I expected, like the road had been waiting for me to return. When we pulled into the cul-de-sac, the house looked the same, but everything around it felt wrong. The porch light was on in the daytime. Richard was pacing in wide, anxious circles. Janice sat on the steps with her head in her hands. No laughter, no eye contact, no control. For the first time in my life, they looked small. I stepped out of the car and walked up slowly, hands in my pockets, shoulders steady. No one said hello. Richard was the first to speak, voice sharp with tension. Where the hell have you been? I tilted my head. Not here. Like you wanted. His jaw tightened. Before he could reply, Janice stood up, her eyes red and swollen. Claire? It's Chase. I waited. He stole from the wrong people at that arcade he hangs out at. We don't know all the details yet, but someone called the cops. He's being held. They say it might go to court. I folded my arms. And what does that have to do with me? Janice hesitated. We need money, bail, a lawyer, something. We need your help. There it was. Not we miss you, not we were wrong. Just we need. I looked at both of them, really looked. The people who taught me to disappear unless I was useful. And now here they were, digging through the rubble of their golden child, trying to find a way out. Let me get this straight, I said quietly. You told me I was unwanted. You stood there while Chase said I didn't belong. And now that he's in trouble, I'm suddenly family again. Richard rubbed a hand down his face. This isn't about all that. This is about Chase. He needs help. Janice's voice cracked. Please. We can talk about everything else later, but right now, we need to get him out. I paused. How much bail is $10,000? We can pay part, but we need you to cover the rest. I nodded slowly. 10 grand. Their eyes lit up, hopeful, desperate, relieved. And then I said it. Absolutely not. Janice flinched. Richard looked like he'd been slapped. Excuse me, he barked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. Not my problem, I said again. Janice reached for my arm. Claire, he's your brother. I stepped back. No, he's your son, and I'm the one you made clear doesn't belong. Richard stepped forward, anger simmering beneath his calm tone. You think you're proving something? You think this is fair? I met his eyes. No, I think it's overdue. Janice's voice cracked. We'll pay you back. We just need help right now. We can't do this without you. I didn't answer. I wanted to watch them sit in it, let the silence stretch, let them feel what I've felt for years. Then finally I spoke. I'll consider helping, on one condition. They both looked up. Anything, Janice whispered. I want a public apology, in the family group chat, a real one. No excuses, no soft phrasing. I want you all to write out every way you've pushed me aside, and I want you to thank me for helping. Word for word. No shortcuts. Richard scoffed. You're being petty. No, I said, I'm setting terms. Just like you always did. It took hours, but eventually the group chat lit up. First from Richard. We need to talk about how we've treated Claire. We've made mistakes. Then from Janice hesitantly, we realize now how much we've hurt her. She's an important part of this family. We are grateful for her help. Chase's message came last, and it was the most forced of all. Sorry for being a jerk. Appreciate it. I stared at the screen. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel moved. But it was something. I sent back a thumbs-up emoji. That was all. They waited. And waited. But I never sent the money. Because I wasn't part of the group anymore. They could type whatever they wanted. But I knew the truth. Words cost nothing, and they were still cheaper than I deserved. The next morning, my phone rang again. I knew that number. Correctional facility. County lockup. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. You really gonna do this to me? Chase's voice was low, sharp, threaded with disbelief. I didn't say anything at first. I thought you were better than this, he added, like it was meant to shame me. I leaned back on Melissa's couch, staring at the ceiling. Better than what Than leaving me here. Than letting them fall apart. I almost laughed. You mean like you all left me? Like when you tore up my work and said it didn't matter? When you told me no one needed me? He didn't answer. I waited. Then I spoke quiet but clear. I thought about helping. I really did. But you, Richard Janice, you've made it very clear that I'm only useful when you're drowning. We didn't mean it like that. But you did. I cut in. And now I believe you. The silence on his end wasn't angry this time. It was tight, bare, like he didn't know where else to go. You're really just gonna leave me here? I closed my eyes, took a slow breath. You said you didn't need me. I'm just agreeing with you. Before he could respond, I whispered one last thing. Enjoy your stay. And then I hung up. No slamming, no rage, just the soft click of letting go. That night, I didn't check my phone. Melissa and I ordered takeout Thai extra noodles. She let me choose the movie, even though I barely watched it. At some point, I realized I was smiling. Not because of what happened, not because I'd won, but because for the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. No errands, no guilt, no rooms I had to tiptoe through trying not to take up too much space. Just quiet. And noodles. And a couch that didn't sigh when I sat down. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel powerful. I felt light. Like I'd taken off something heavy I didn't even know I was wearing. Later, as I sat by the window watching a streetlight blink over the sidewalk, I thought about how peace feels different when you're not performing it. When you're not trying to show anyone you're okay. It doesn't look like revenge. It doesn't sound like a clapback. It just feels still. My phone buzzed once, then again. I didn't reach for it. Let them wonder. Let them spiral. Let them find someone else to balance the pieces Chase broke. I wasn't their daughter anymore. Not the reliable one. Not the backup plan. Not the one who fixed it all while they laughed in another room. They chose their story a long time ago. I just stopped reading it. And in this small borrowed living room wrapped in a fleece blanket that didn't match anything with takeout boxes half empty on the table, I realized something peace doesn't ask for attention. It just lets you breathe. The next morning, another text came in. You can't ignore us forever. But they were wrong. Because ignoring someone means you still hear them. And I didn't. Not anymore. I made coffee, opened a new tab on my laptop, typed in nursing programs, late applications. I wasn't trying to start over. I was just finally starting. They could keep spiraling, keep calling, keep rewriting the story. I wasn't part of it anymore. They said they didn't need me. So I gave them exactly that. If they ever made you feel like the quiet one was easier to lose, just leave a dot.